Welcome to the Kaizen Gal Podcast. This is your host, MC. The Kaizen Gal is a podcast about continuous improvement, building the habits to make the most out of what you already have and scale your progress in a sustainable way. Some people say, don't work harder, work smarter. Well, I believe that we can do both if we balance our time, energy, and drive well. On to today's episode. I am starting a 5-part story. Yes, yet again, another series. But I am starting a 5-part story on how I went from having thousands of dollars in debt and being expelled from my apartment to buying a whole house by myself in 6 years. First and foremost, in all of that story I'm going to tell, I want to give credit to God because honestly, He makes the impossible happen. And we are basically instruments of His wonderful works, and our lives are a demonstration of His undeserved grace towards us. Now that this is stated, a little background about the story. So we are in 2014. Actually, let's say 2013. I was living in an apartment, and then my dad asked me to move to, and this story is going to paint a not so glorious picture of some family members, but I love them and we are on good terms. I would just never trust them with money nor my future anymore. So my dad tells me that my younger sister, who lives in the US, and he's basically telling me that she's going to come and stay with me up here in Montreal. And I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment, which meant that I needed to move. But I couldn't move in Montreal. In Canada in general, people move on July 1st. So I couldn't move before July 1st. So I looked for an apartment, high and low, couldn't find one. Basically ended up moving in the same building that I was in, but in an apartment with 2 bedrooms instead of just one. And I moved in July. My sister was supposed to come by the end of August. And that's where stuff started to hit the fan. First thing, she didn't move. She didn't come in end of August, September, as she was supposed to. Don't remember what happened in terms of documentation and stuff. Her transfer didn't happen, so on. Basically, she couldn't come to Montreal at the time that she said she could. From that point, I was in a 2-bedroom apartment. So what I did was I was renting out her bedroom to someone else. My dad was paying the rent for the apartment because basically I was living in an apartment that I could afford. He had me move to an apartment I could not afford, and he was the one paying the rent on that. Yes, I could have paid my own part of the rent, but it was just convenient to have him pay for the whole rent. And I had that person renting my sister's room at the time. So that was done. And then that person only stayed for 3 months or something and then left. And then my sister eventually came to the apartment and she stayed in Montreal for a year, maybe a little bit over a year. And then one holiday season, she went back home. It was in December 2014. She went back home to my home country, birth country. She went back there and she never came back. She went, and a few months into January, she was supposed to start school, university again. So she was supposed to go back. And I was just asking her, are you coming? When are you coming back? Because I have to manage my schedule to go pick you up at the airport. And she was like, no, I'm not coming back. And from that point, my dad also stopped paying the rent of the apartment that I was in. Mind you, he was already a month late. And that apartment was expensive, y'all. It was $1,400 per month. The apartment that I was in before was $700 per month. So even if I wanted to, I would not have been able to pay that rent. But in my mind, I guess, it never occurred to me that my dad would just not pay the rent. I'm his daughter, so he's going to pay the rent. But January passed by, February passed by, March, and then I got my first warning in April. And then in May, I was brought to court because I owed them something like $9,000. Was it 9 or... Yes, like close to $10,000 that I owed the renters, like the building people. Then I was asked to go to court. I went to court. I lost. I basically went out just to hear the decision from the judge saying that I had to vacate the apartment by a specific date. At the same time, I was then trying to find another apartment. I was on a very restricted time schedule. I just couldn't. And at that point, on June 1st, 2015, I owed close to $10,000 to an agency. At that point, I was making maybe 30, 35, or let's say like top with bonuses and stuff, I would probably making $40,000 per year. But I owed that agency $10,000. And yeah, I was in big trouble. And then they passed on the debt that I had to a collection agency to not have to deal with me anymore. And that's how my story starts. Me being expelled from one day to the next, having a few weeks to move, change apartment, move all of my stuff, move the stuff that my sister had left behind as well, or at least try and sell it. A whole struggle. And I was in debt at that point, and I thought, that's my nature. I'm a fighter. You are gonna hit me. I'm gonna hit the ground. I may stay on the ground, but sooner or later, believe me, praise the Lord my God, I will stand back up. There are a few things that I did to pay down that debt and also manage any debt that I had, because I had credit cards and things like that. And even before, in November 2014, my credit score had already been hit because, being a youngster, some bad habit with credit cards, my credit score wasn't good. But praise the Lord, I only got to know it because I was working for a security company and they had a credit check on me. And they were like, your credit is not good. That's what happened. And a few things that I did to pay down the debt that I had and manage any incoming debt. And the first thing was having a strict budget. Now, let me put that into further context. I had been using Mint, the app Mint from Intuit, since probably 2011. I had been using Mint. It was more so like to see where I was spending money, but I wasn't really looking at it to see where money was coming from, where money was coming out, and actually diligently looking at it. I was just logging the request, logging the transactions. It was connected to my account, and that was it. So I had a look at my budget and just looking at what are the different things I can cut in my budget. What are the things that I need, that I don't need? And it actually started a little bit before I moved into the new apartment, because the rent was also something that I was looking at, since it was the rent that put me in trouble in the first place. I was doing month-to-month budget, and I am still doing month-to-month budget with Mint. I have an Excel sheet. And the one thing that has changed over the years is I'm now doing a yearly spending budget, or yearly spending plan and expenses and income. And I'm going to link a few of the templates that I use as an inspiration in the description box or in the script of the podcast. But basically, the first inspiration I got was from One Big Happy Life. They do have 1 year spending plan. And then the second one was the budget from Patricia Bright. She's a YouTuber from the UK. I actually stopped when she was presenting her template on the screen, and she did a video like a while back, but I'm not able to find it. It was probably like 4 or 5 years ago, but I cannot for the life of me find it. But she's been redoing that video every other year. So there's a more recent one. It's not exactly the one that I was inspired by, but it has the key elements. And the third resource that I'm going to link is Steph and Dennis. This is a couple from Toronto. They're really good in terms of personal finance content, and they also have a budget template. Basically, in your budget, you put every single thing. I was writing down every single expense in Mint, and on my Excel sheet, I was recategorizing every single expense as well. If I was able to make any money from contract, freelance work, from selling stuff, I would add that money manually to Mint and to my Excel sheet, just to make sure that I had a clear idea of what I was spending. I can go a little bit more in details about like exactly what is in my budget, but just long story short, breaking down different sections of expenses. It was about making sure that these expenses do not represent a certain percentage of my total income after tax. So my budget is not based on my income before taxes. My budget is based on my income after taxes, because this is really the money that I have. The money that I owe the government is not counted towards my expenses. So a strict budget. And if you want me to elaborate on that, to show you a few things that I'm doing or explain them to you, because I'm podcasting, not vlogging, I can definitely do that. The second thing that I didn't know was possible, but it was basically the debt collection agency that gave me that idea, is to negotiate a debt repayment arrangement. Because the collection agency, what they want is they don't want to run after you and call you every month to make sure that you're going to make your payment and be done with the debt. What they want is, instead of dragging that money for so long, they want you to pay as quickly as possible. One thing, as I was paying my debt month after month, I think it only took June and July and August. And then in August, they were calling me to ask me if I was going to be able to pay. And I said, yes, I'm just waiting for this money to drop and I'm going to pay that. And then I said, I'm actually going to pay more because I'm expecting more money. Because my thing at the time was, you have debt, you want to get rid of that as soon as possible. And the lady I was talking to on the phone, she told me, do you know, at that point, I didn't owe them $10,000 anymore. I owed them something like maybe $7,900, $7,800. And she basically told me, if you manage to pay half of what you owe us, we are going to cancel the other half. Let me tell you, I was like, you mean if I pay 50% of what I owe you in a month, you are going to forgive the other 50%? She was like, yes. Could not believe my ears. Maybe it's because I was young at the time. I didn't know all of that. But I worked my butt off during that month to pay that. And that's how, after 3 months and paying close to $6,000, I was free of a $10,000 debt, because I was able to negotiate with them. She gave me the idea, and then I negotiated back and forth, and we settled on a specific amount by a specific date. The third thing, I mentioned that I wanted to manage the debt that I had. I actually read so many articles about credit cards, understanding the billing cycle of credit cards, and setting up alarms to pay my credit card in full each month. At that point, I only had one. So my goal was to pay my credit card before the end of the 2 weeks grace period, so that I would not have any interest at the end of the cycle, even if I had gotten a balance afterwards, because that's how it works. If you don't have a balance at the end of the 2 grace weeks period, you won't be charged any interest. Maybe things have changed, so highly, highly recommend that you also check for yourself. But this is how it worked at the time, and this is what I've been doing ever since. Hasn't faltered me once. The fourth thing that I did was linking my credit card repayment to my budget. So repayment of my credit card was a bill. Your credit card money is not your money. It is the bank money. So by linking my budget sheet and my mint to the balance on my credit card, I was able to see how much interest I would owe the bank if I was doing the minimum payment, and how I would pay it down based on timeline or on payment amounts. That motivated me, because I could see how sometimes by not paying enough, I would see if I kept the trend going, I would pay the bank an additional $200 or $300 for the year, just by accumulating these interest fees on the debt. So having a close look at the credit card repayment, they also have great calculators online that kind of tell you, they would typically tell you how much you would owe at a specific time, but it's also possible for you, based on the interest rate on the credit card, on how much you're paying, to know how much interest you would pay, depending on how much time you want to spend paying that debt. So mind your money and mind your credit card. These are sucker of your money, basically. Then the fifth step was to set up an emergency fund. So the rule of thumb says 6 months to 9 months, I think, but I'm more of a 1 year saving plan, emergency fund, so that I don't have to use my credit card whenever I have an emergency. And you will hear in the next episode how I actually use that emergency fund. I know you're not supposed to do that, but hear me out. I used it and I replaced it. The last thing that I did was to automate every single bill possible. I want all of them to leave from the same account, and I want auto reload to be deactivated from all of the cards that I can. So my mobile phone bill, internet, electricity, car insurance, house insurance, everything had to be taken automatically. And on top of that, what I did, and I still do now, is in my calendar, I have reminders of the day each of these different bills is supposed to be taken out of my account. Because one of my accounts is dedicated to paying bills, and sometimes because it's dispatching basically money to other accounts, I also make sure that account always has enough money to pay my bills. And deactivated the auto reload, I cannot tell you, like Starbucks card, then all of these things that just like when you are at zero, it almost prompts you to, hey, do you want to auto reload, or subscriptions as well, things like that. They are not going to make you rich. It's not by saving like $14, $15 on a subscription that you're going to get richer. But what it's going to do is you will be able to reallocate that small amount gradually going into somewhat of a big amount to another expense. That's the goal. Because, for instance, my Netflix has been deactivated for 2 years now, and I haven't felt the need to reactivate it, but that money has certainly gone into doing other things, and I don't feel like putting that money back into Netflix. It's just, I don't feel like it. So these are the 6 things that I did to manage or pay down debt. I'm going to summarize them. Having a budget. I'm going to link resources for the budget in the description or the script. Negotiate debt repayment arrangement. You also want to negotiate your bills every year if you need to. Understand the billing cycle of your credit card so that you can pay them before you start to accrue interest. You want to link your credit card repayment to your budget sheet so that as an incentive, you can see how much more money you would pay if you were to skip a payment or just pay the minimum payment. 5th is you want to set up an emergency fund so that you do not use your credit card whenever there's an actual emergency. And then 6th is you want to automate every single bill possible and deactivate any auto reload that you have on your cards. These 6 things actually helped me out to get out of debt in, I would say, in under a year. I was very aggressive. So I paid the $4,000 in the month of August. And after that, so that allowed me to pay the first $2,000 in 2 months. That allowed me to do that. As I was paying a new apartment and cost of living and all of that, I was still able to pay $2,800. And I wasn't making that money per month. So it was a big chunk of my income at that time. And from that, I was able to get my credit score back up. My goal was for my birthday in March 2016, but I was actually able to do so in February 2016. And that is where the story stops. The next episode is going to be pay yourself first. Again, going back to the fact that it's the Lord, Jesus, first. And these things, because I really believe he did inspire me a lot of wisdom when it came to financial resources management. And that really helped me turn my life around, really. And part of it is also on the career side, which I'm going to cover after, maybe. Part of it was me also advocating for myself, being able to negotiate. And it's still hard for me to negotiate salary, to be honest. But I do it because I know now, I have enough confidence to know that I'm delivering the work that I'm being paid for. You don't even need to supervise me for me to do it. So a lot of things was just very hard in 2015. And somehow by putting my head first and just grinding on saving and not spending as much, or spending smart, spending on things that really, like Marie Kondo would say, bring me joy or help me move forward, motivate me. These are really the things that I was doing in 2015. And honestly, it helped so much, and the Lord helped even more, like tremendously, on the days that I wasn't motivated to do anything. So I'm excited to be sharing that with you all. Bye. That's it for me today. I hope you found that episode helpful and insightful. If you have questions or topic you'd like me to address, email me at the email address in the description box. And last but not least, leave your 5-star review anywhere you are listening. It really encourages me. I wish you, wherever you are, to be well, and I will talk to you next time.